This is a presentation about the Vikings and the first archaeological site of Owens, which is considered the first Norse outpost in North America, 500 years before Columbus. The Vikings were seafaring men from the North and Baltic Seas, which is considered modern-day Scandinavian countries of Norway, Sweden, and Denmark. The Vikings are also called Norsemen because Norse means north, and the Vikings were a people group who settled in the north in Scandinavia. There are many theories surrounding the peopling of modern-day Europe. Perhaps people migrated across Russia. According to Owens, during the mid-upper Paleolithic times, human groups known as the Upper Paleolithic Aurignacian culture became extremely successful in occupying northerly regions even during the winter. Due to the extreme cold that came about, they may have settled into Siberia, Eastern and Western Europe, and coexisted with the last Neanderthals for several thousand years. According to scientists Orlando and Willerslev, it turns out that Scandinavians are more closely related to the Potensky man than any other now living population. Shown here is an excavation site in 2003 where they found remains and artifacts dating to 40,000 years ago, and it included the evidence of shells, which shows that they transported them from other locations, as well as bone and antler tools and carved ivory. Over 12,000 years ago, in the Neolithic period in Scandinavia, the early ancestors of the Vikings traveled across the northern European area as hunter-gatherers. Artifacts have been uncovered all throughout Scandinavia, and they reveal the use of bows and arrows, scrapers, harpoons, spears, and it shows that their innovation and tool-making skills were at work. Here's a picture of some flint axes that were discovered in Denmark. There's also a great abundance of natural resources such as fish and fowl, so people began to settle here and establish farms and keep animals as pets. And there were graves that had been excavated with animals buried next to people, so they obviously had pets and valued animals. Next, I kind of lumped this together, the Bronze Age and the Iron Age. Between the years 1700 BC to 800 AD, the Vikings were farmers first. They were known as warriors and pillagers, but they were first farmers in small kingdoms, and sometimes they fought among themselves. They would farm for most of the year, then go exploring in boats. The more they went out sailing on the open seas, the better they became at crafting and constructing boats that they're so famously known for. But during this period of time, there were big changes in this society. There was trade, there was language, and it was important. Language is important because it was found on some artifacts as far away as the Middle East. And it shows that they traveled and that they were trading. There are also the remains of longhouses, which are important also because those were found in other archaeological sites. Weapons, personal ornaments, there's evidence of religious culture in some of the artifacts that have been uncovered. There's the use of metals and weapons and for nails for boats, which is also important because they probably went in search of iron bog ore, which I'll talk about in a minute. Here's a little bit of the language that's been uncovered, and here's a bone, a fragment of a bone that was found in Sweden dating between the years 800 to 1000 AD. And because they were such terrific ship makers and adventurers, it allowed them to travel and they became superior tradesmen. And their boats were constructed using wood, animal products, and eventually iron or nails. So that shows that they were early explorers and they ventured out from their settlements quite frequently. Next, we enter into the Viking Age, which is estimated around 793 to 1100 AD. Just as a point of reference, this is the same time period as Cahokia was being constructed near what is modern-day St. Louis. But why did they leave Greenland and Scandinavia? Many scholars believe that they went sailing west because they liked and needed to explore, or they were in search of profit, or maybe there was an overpopulation. There was the explorer Eric the Red that went in search of a new land and ended up establishing and discovering Greenland in the year 980 AD or 986 AD. And he discovers and colonizes Greenland, and soon others joined him, and he was an esteemed chieftain. Later, his son Leif Erikson would grow into a Viking leader and eventually lead explorations to new lands, including L'Anse aux Meadows. So why did they leave Scandinavia? Why did they leave Greenland? Some other theories are that they went, besides wanting to be explorers, that they went in search of profit. But probably most likely is they went in search of resources like trees for boats. There were not trees large enough growing in Greenland to build the types of ships that they were wanting to do. So Norsemen like Leif Erikson, who was son of Eric the Red, with 35 men, set sail from Greenland to find places to colonize in a European-type culture. Well, how do archaeologists, scientists, and historians know where to look for these archaeological clues? It's really interesting that the Vikings left their history in what is called the Icelandic sagas. It's widely debated as fact or fiction, but they are accounts of travels and stopping points in exploration. And there is one such mention of a discovery of Vinland. But where is Vinland? Well, archaeological husband and wife team Anne Stein and Helge Instead went in search of the information that was noted about the Vinland area. Where was Vinland? They studied the accounts and travels in the Icelandic sagas and the travels by Leif Erikson, and they found a place what they thought to be Vinland was in North America, specifically in Newfoundland. So they set out to prove that that's exactly where it was, L'Anse aux Meadows. So L'Anse aux Meadows is, here it's shown, it's so significant because it proves that the Norse were the first Europeans to land in North America. And you can see here, this is a reconstruction of a Viking longhouse that was found. During the years 1960 to 1968, Anne Stein and Helge Instead, they conducted 7 excavations. And according to Instead, in his book, he found 8 to 9 house sites made of turf that were excavated. And they have been since reconstructed. If you go there today, you can see the longhouses. Some were apparently rather large. And he also, the husband and wife team, also found important artifacts such as a ring-headed pin made of bronze that would have been used as a clothes fastening. And they know this to be of Viking origin because these are also found in Greenland. And there was a type of tool that women would have used that was excavated, which also proves that women were there. It was a spindle made of soapstone. So this was just an amazing find. They also found in excavation remains of a blacksmith forge with iron that was fashioned from bog iron, which is the way that they would produce iron in Greenland as well. So this was very exciting. L'Anse aux Meadows is now a United Nations educational, scientific, and cultural organizational World Heritage Site. So this is one of the findings. This is an example. It's iron slag, and it's a remnant of a process of refining iron ore that's found naturally in swamp bogs. So bog iron is cultivated by poking through the top layer of a grassy bog. It's very labor intensive. They would have to go about and just randomly look for poking into the dirt until they found something hard, and then they would dig it up. And so the bog iron was a very hard substance that, through another labor-intensive process of heating and refining it in small kilns, they were able, in fire pits, a blacksmith was left with a form of iron that they could fashion into swords and tools, and most importantly for the Vikings, nails, so for their boats. So this process the Vikings used in Greenland, and excavation sites at Owens Meadows revealed the remains of cultural materials such as slag, charcoal, an anvil, and fragments of iron. So it really solidified and substantiated that this indeed was a Norse outpost, and because these same items were found in Greenland. Here also in this picture is some slag that was found in a new site that is more recent than Owens Meadows, which was back in the 60s. But recently, the Viking saga continues, and space archaeologist Sarah Parkick, as she's known, the space archaeologist, she is now using satellite imagery to examine the tall grasses and plant life on Newfoundland, and looking for variations in the vegetation and looking for possible excavation sites. She has done this type of work in Egypt and has uncovered lots of archaeological finds there. So she's using that same technology. And most recently in 2016, they did find a variance at Point Rosie in Newfoundland. And then once on the site, they've used remote sensing such as ground penetrating radar to find more remnants of the iron. And indeed they did find those pieces in that last slide of the slag that was left behind. So that's really exciting too. They're continuing to dig at Point Rosie, and one of the most important, I thought was really interesting find is they uncovered through the excavation process a butternut. And butternuts are not grown in Newfoundland. So it proves that the Vikings traveled and they brought their goods and other things with them as they traveled. So this is a really rich history for the Viking people. I only scratched the surface. There's a lot more to learn about them, but they have a really rich history, and it's exciting to learn about a people group that were so adventurous.